concept of choice is something we're all familiar with. It's an entirely ubiquitous part of daily life, which is impossible to avoid. And what I mean by this is that choices are inextricably linked to everything you do. Even if it was mostly subconscious, it was still a decision you made, a choice that led to you watching this video, for example. Divorcing your actions from persistent and continuous decision-making just doesn't work. And here's where Life is Strange comes in. Life is Strange is an episodic adventure game. It's very similar to the Telltale games in the sense that the bulk of the gameplay is based around exploring your immediate surroundings, making conversational choices, and just following the story. You play as Max, an 18-year-old photography student at a prestigious art school. After witnessing a murder early on in the game, Max learns that she has the ability to rewind time. She does this and saves someone who she initially doesn't recognise, but it ends up being her best friend from her childhood, Chloe. There are other storylines going on here too. Max has a vision of Arcadia Bay, the town the game takes place in, being destroyed by a massive tornado in a few days' time, and there's also a hunt for a missing person. It all sounds a bit much at once to start with, but it does work. So back to the time mechanic though. It's really interesting. Choices in games are hardly a groundbreaking concept, but here we're afforded the opportunity to experience something that is fresh and new, and that is the ability to have a second chance. Video games as a medium are intimately connected with finality. Because they involve player-based actions, there's very seldom the option to redo. This doesn't present itself in other media because they lack that level of player agency. The ability to toy with finality is what makes Life is Strange incredibly exciting. This is seen early on in the game when you have the option to tell the principal of your school that Nathan, the boy who shot Chloe before you sorted that out, was waving about a gun on school grounds. If you do this, Max's inner dialogue toys with the idea of going back and giving another option where you don't rat him out. This is really great because it gives the player a heightened sense of control, which is fun. It's nice being able to manipulate time in order to do or say the right thing in every situation. There are some instances where you learn information midway through a conversation, information which would have helped you at the start, so you can just pop back and use this information to your benefit. It imbues a sense of power, but also recklessness. I would hazard a guess that while this power has clear benefits, it would become easy to either consider yourself invincible or rely on it as a crutch. And here's where we get back to the concept of choice, right? Of all the choice-based games I've played, I definitely feel as if Life is Strange is the one where the choices mattered most and carried the most weight. This seems contradictory, considering I've just said that you can go back and change your choices, so how could a choice be important if it can be changed on a whim? What I mean here is that the choices affect the outcome of the story in a pretty considerable way. One of the best examples for this is at the end of Chapter 2. One of your classmates, Kate, has been struggling with bullying and mental health issues and is about to commit suicide by jumping off a school building. Using your time manipulation, you manage to get up to the roof before she irreversibly jumps off. Now, as you reach the roof, you exhaust your time control powers and can't use them anymore, which is bloody typical, isn't it? But this leads to a conversation with Kate, in which you try and convince her not to jump. Firstly, I think it's worth commending the game for tackling heavy themes. Suicide and mental health in particular are tricky topics to cover, but I think the game did a good job. Anyway though, your conversation with Kate is the first instance in the game where there's no safety blanket for you. The weight of each thing you say is exponentially amplified as the conversation continues, and everything really is important if you do want to stop her. What makes this moment smart though, is that it not only puts the pressure on by taking away your time mechanic, but also takes into account all of your previous decisions regarding Kate. There are plenty of smaller interactions you have, plenty of optional things you could have found, which would help you in this situation, depending on how you dealt with them. This adds a gravitas to every single choice that you make, because from this point on, you never know quite how far-reaching the consequences of any given option could be, regardless of how insignificant it may seem at face value. In a game entirely governed by player choices, it's tough to pick specific moments without contextualizing everything, so you're going to have to forgive a bit more exposition if that's alright. I want to bring up Chloe again, because she's the key to most of the big choices made in the game. Chloe is a bit of a problem child. She's involved in a lot of sketchy stuff, and most of her change in personality can be attributed to her dad's death in a car crash a few years earlier on. Now, I also mentioned earlier that Max and Chloe used to be best friends. Max moved away with her family shortly after Chloe's dad died, but came back recently to attend school. This is why she didn't initially recognise Chloe, because she looks quite different. Now, this is all important for the next bit I want to talk about. So far, the time manipulation is only extended to very short periods of time, but at the end of Chapter 3, as you're looking at a photograph of Chloe and Max, which was taken on the day Chloe's dad died, you can focus in on the picture and head back to when it was taken. Max finds herself in this new situation and resolves to stop Chloe's dad from dying. She manages this and wakes up in a new alternate future. She goes to Chloe's house and sees Chloe's dad there, alive, but finds out that Chloe is now wheelchair-bound and paralysed from the neck down. This is a right kick in the teeth. The whole time, all you've been trying to do is help, do the right thing. The idea is nice. If Chloe's dad doesn't die, the suffering that the family goes through is hypothetically mitigated, and everyone ends up happy. But as Life is Strange lets us know, it's never that easy. You spend some time in this alternate reality with Chloe, and it hits the point where you find out that she's actually not that long for this world, and she asks you to help her die. This is a ridiculously heavy decision. Again, all of this was done with the intention of helping Chloe and her family, but it's thrown another miserable situation into the mix. What makes this so difficult is that you start thinking as a player about priorities and the inherent value in life. Whose life is worth more, right? Is it Chloe's or her dad's? Is Chloe's life worth more because she's younger, or because she's closer to me? Which reality do I now want to be in? Everything feels a bit out of your league now, and that's good. It's intelligent storytelling. It seems easy to nip back a minute or so to change what you said in a conversation, but having the ability to choose between life and death for the people around you is a bit much. Eventually, you have to go back to the moment where you stopped Chloe's dad dying and let it all play out. You've gone from being blissfully ignorant of his death before it happened to being an active and cognizant participant in it. This returns you back to your original reality, but with a lot more weight. Choice is really confusing. The game knows this. One of my favourite things about it, though, is that it's not all black and white, and the game doesn't push one viewpoint as being more important. What I mean here is that the game encourages both free will and the ability to change your own destiny, but also plays with the idea of fatalism to a certain extent. Let's use the two examples we've talked about. When it comes to Kate's suicide, you can play a role there. If you answer her call earlier on, take an interest in helping her out, say the right things, then you can save her, and the entire future is different as a result of it. You absolutely have the power to change things. But when we take saving Chloe's dad into account, it's different. Of course, we did change the future, but it was a future in which the outcome was pretty much as severe. You feel powerless, which is in direct opposition to most of your feelings before. It doesn't matter which option you take, whether you save Chloe's dad or not, both futures aligned with misery and suffering. Even though you went in with the best intentions, you've only served to cause more pain. So what does the game want you to believe? What does it believe itself? What is the purpose of choice? Do we even have choice, or is it just an illusion? Well, as far as I'm concerned, Life is Strange doesn't answer any of these questions. Which is good, though. I think that's totally fine. It doesn't have to. I think it just provides the player with sufficient information to come to their own conclusions. To explain this, I'm going to use one more example from the game, which is the ending. Chapter 5 is a bit odd. You can play the game if you want to see exactly in what way. But it culminates with this tornado that I mentioned earlier, well on its way to wrecking the whole town. Max and Chloe suss out that this has been a result of the butterfly effect, and Max messing about with time. Now, this actually isn't as out of the blue as I've just made it sound. The idea is toyed with through the game, I just hadn't mentioned it. But basically, if Max goes back and never saves Chloe, and never messes with time, the town and everyone in it will be saved, because this massive tornado just won't exist. So you're left with two options. Do you sacrifice Chloe, or do you sacrifice Arcadia Bay? This ending annoyed a lot of people. The general consensus was that this was frustrating, because it messed with the formula the game had been working with the whole time. Every chapter starts with a warning telling you that your choices matter. We've seen that choices do have a huge impact on how the story develops. So when you get to the end, none of your choices have mattered at all, really. It's easy to see why this is disappointing. I mean, I don't think it's disappointing, though, actually. I actually quite like it. I think this inability to have ultimate control has already been alluded to with the death of Chloe's dad. I mentioned fatalism earlier, and my aim here isn't to say that Life is Strange is fatalistic propaganda. I just think there's a moral to be found in the game when looking at this. I would say it would be acceptance, and the importance in accepting that most things are realistically beyond our control. Even if we were to do everything right, things will still go wrong. It's vital to understand that, and to be able to come to terms with it is equally important. The game also really emphasises the difficulty inherent in choice, both in terms of accepting the consequences of choices, or lack thereof, and in terms of having to decide when you don't know what's best. The final thing I want to bring up, though, is why this final choice is difficult. Let's take sacrificing Arcadia Bay, or saving Chloe, to start. You've been with Chloe from the start of the game, and the game really accentuates the strength of their friendship. The game has also taught us about the consequences of messing with time. If you combine these two things, it makes sense to choose to save her, right? Well, if you look at it the other way, the town and everyone in it will be obliterated if you don't go and sacrifice Chloe. So what's worth more, again? The person you're closest to, or everyone else? Life is Strange asks some really big questions and deals with some really big themes. It's hard to know what's the wrong or right choice, or if choices even matter, but this is analogous to reality. What Life is Strange says to me is that the most you can do is just try to do the right thing. And as morals go, I think that's a pretty decent one. So, well, that's that. It's a really good game, a bit harrowing at points, but really quite good. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a comment. I'd be interested in hearing what you have to say. Games like this can really divide opinion, so it's always good to hear what someone else thinks. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.